guys. Welcome to Conversations with Christie. How are you? I am so excited, you guys, for today's live stream. So, we actually had planned this, back in June, and
It is
life
so.
happened to both of us, and we weren't able to get this out. So, we are going to read my birth chart today. And so we are going to go over like what a birth chart looks like. What, not we, Karena is going to go over what a birth chart looks like, transits,
Yeah,
everything like that, you know, and really give a reading so you guys can get an idea of what a birth chart reading looks like and what it can tell you. So I also want to say, oh, okay. Am I freezing? Oh my goodness,
just for
guys.
a
I
second.
also want to say that I have no idea what she's. Okay, well, it's where I'm at. I have no idea what she's going to say. We're all going to learn this together. But Karina, I want you to be honest. Just give it to me,
Oh,
girl. You know,
you
whatever is coming up.
you are literally the most amazing person, Christy. And I just want to all of us to kind of take a second and thank Christy because birth chart readings, some sensitive stuff can come up, some deep stuff can come up. And so being willing to sort of share in a public forum in a way that can help others learn, honestly, that's just one thing I think all of us love about your channel, Christy, is just that you're showing up, you're showing us the real you, authentic, vulnerable. So we are all so grateful that you are kind of giving us this opportunity to collectively go through a birth chart together. And maybe a quick thing. Yeah, Christy is right. She doesn't know what I'm going to say. I only sort of know what I'm going to say because some of this does tend to flow in the moment. And, questions come up and then a dialogue ensues, and maybe we hone in on a certain part of the chart that we weren't expecting to. And I did read for Christy back in June, but all of the planets keep moving. It turns out nothing stays still. Jupiter keeps moving, Saturn keeps moving, the moon keeps moving, they all keep moving. So so I'll take a second and just kind of step back and talk about what a birth chart is and then why we care that the planets keep moving. So this is definitely going to be a birth chart reading, but we're all, oh, I love the little black kitten. Oh my gosh, so much, so much, so much.
This is Edgar, for those of you who have not met him yet. This is Edgar. Well, Michael wanted to name him Poe, but I'm like, that's so common. Let's name him Edgar. I feel it's more dignified. As he
He's
sticks his butt in
so
my face.
precious. I've got 3 cats, and I hope I am not overly distracted by precious Edgar. So this will definitely be a birth chart reading, but I will be spending a little bit more time than usual, not just interpreting the chart, but also sort of explaining a little bit of the behind the scenes, what I'm doing and where I'm getting things so that people can start seeing what that looks like. So let's start with the birth chart. So when each one of us is born, we emerge into the world, we take our first breath. At that point, all of the planets are somewhere. They are somewhere, right? It's not like Saturn ceased to exist at the moment we were born. The sun, the moon, maybe we were born at noon and the sun was almost directly overhead. Maybe we were born at midnight and the sun was on the other side of the earth. But the sun, the moon, all of the planets, they were somewhere. And the idea behind astrology is that the positions of the planets at the time of our birth represent, honestly, what they represent is so much, it's a little incredible, but it represents physical things that might happen in our life, career changes, moves, relationships, and also, spiritual, psychological things, changes that happen within us, changes in belief systems and values, perspectives. And it's incredible. It sounds almost unbelievable that the position of these planetary bodies would affect us. But the ancient Most ancient cultures have a tradition of astrology where they do attribute meaning of the positions of the planets and stars. And so, in many ways, we're carrying on this ancient tradition, and we don't know exactly where it all came from. We know where pieces of it came from, but a lot of this has been practiced since before recorded history. So, it's just kind of amazing and special
Right.
that we can continue this tradition together.
Yes.
If there are any
So Halloween. Look at
no,
that.
I'm loving it. Edgar on top of the pumpkin. So, we have the birth chart.
Don't eat my
I love that so much. So, we have the birth chart, which is totally static. You know, we capture the position of all of the planets at the time of our birth. And if you aren't sure when you are born, you know, like 2:33 p.m., if you go and look at your birth certificate, it says on your birth certificate. And it may be that a mother, father, family member might remember as well. So once you're born, again, all of the planets keep moving. The moon keeps moving, the sun, everything keeps
Mhm.
moving. And so um, we have our static birth chart, which represents sort of the whole of our life, our purpose, our direction, our strengths and skills, areas for us to develop. And then as the planets keep moving, when they hit sensitive points in our birth chart, they trigger things to happen. So, for example, when Saturn moves all the way around the zodiac and gets to the position of where the sun was when you were born, that means something. When Pluto moves and moves and moves on top of where Mercury was when you were born, that means something. So we have our static birth chart,
Right.
which is sort of the sum representation of us. And then different points in our natal
Mhm.
chart, in our birth chart, get triggered as the planets keep moving. And those two together, I mean, we could go down a lot more rabbit holes, but at a high level, we can say those two sort of represent the trajectory of our life. Not everything happens to us as
Mhm.
humans right away the second that we are born. We have a whole life to
Right.
live, experiences to go through, homes to live in, relationships
Yes.
to be in, jobs to be in, communities to be in. And the timing when these
Right.
things happen is based on when the moving planets move across those sensitive, important points from our original birth chart. So if anything there isn't clear, please post a question because I know most people get the birth chart. Everybody's like, I'm all good. And then we start talking about transits and the planets
Right.
continuing to move, and they're like, I'm not so good anymore. So if there are any questions, please drop them in.
Right. Right.
Otherwise, oh,
Yes, yes, and we'll have Tasia pin those and kind of guys listen to the entirety of everything because I'm pretty sure Karina will answer questions as we go along. So go ahead and pin those. But if we don't get to your question right away, we'll get it at the end. But you might get it answered before we get to it. So,
all right.
okay, I'm excited. So Stasia's got pictures of my actual birth chart and my birth chart with transits.
Yes.
So, what did you want to start with?
Well, I think I
Mikey?
discovered that I can screen share, so I'm going to try and see if I can screen share myself. Um, can people see this?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, I took
oh,
it
okay,
down.
okay,
Do it
okay.
again. That was my
That's
fault.
okay.
I took it.
That's okay. It makes me feel good that. Oh, okay, perfect. Are we good? Yes. All right.
Yes, yes, we can see it.
Perfect.
Awesome.
So, first of all, if you haven't looked at a birth chart before, this can look quite intimidating. It's just a bunch of symbols and colors on this circle, and there's lines everywhere. Astrology is a language. It is a symbolic language. So these symbols mean things. Their positions mean things. But it genuinely is a language. So when I look at a chart like this, I'm basically reading it the way one would read a book. The difference is that this chart doesn't have page 1, page 2, page 3, and chapter beginnings and endings. It's sort of, I have to look at it and pull out the most important parts first. So I have to look at it and kind of say, this part looks really important. We better talk about this. We better talk about this. A birth chart lasts our entire lives. So you never talk about everything in one session. You never even talk about everything in 20 sessions. Again, the planets keep moving, the transits continue to happen. So it's just like our lives, it's an ongoing process. So regardless, right now we are not looking at transits. We are looking exactly at the positions of the planets in the sky at the time that Christie was born. And so far, we really aren't bringing astrology into this. We are just literally looking at the position of the planets. So, for example, and I don't know if anyone can see my mouse. Can anyone see my mouse? Maybe not. Okay. You
Yep,
can see my mouse? All
I can see
right.
it.
Can you see me hovering?
I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we
Yep.
look
Yep.
down at the very bottom, we can see this circle with the dot in it. This represents the sun. And we can see it's at the very bottom of the chart. The very bottom of the chart represents essentially the other side of the earth, from the side that you are on. So when Christie was born, we can see up here in the upper left-hand corner, it was 2:40 in the morning. The sun was definitely on the other side of the earth. The sun was not above the horizon. But this horizontal line here basically divides everything above this line is visible in the sky. Everything below this line is on the other side of the earth. And then all of these points around the circle just represent the sun, Mercury, Venus, Neptune, the ascendant or rising, which is a very important point in astrology, the point of the sky that was exactly rising in the east at the time of our birth. And then these symbols on the outer ring, these are just the zodiac signs. So here we have Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, etc., all the way around. And again, it's not important that you know all of these or remember which symbol is the sun and which symbol is Aries. Totally not important. I just want everyone to know these do mean something. They very specifically represent something. And these symbols are just shortcuts for longer words and meanings. All right, so I'm going to kind of dive in here. And so far, again, we are not looking at any transits or where the planets are right now on Monday. We are basically looking at exactly the frozen point in time when Christie was born. So there are several things that jump out to me right away. First of all, people who have the sun really low in the chart, who were born during those depths of the night, those night hours, they tend to be very comfortable with the dark, with the shadows, with the esoteric, with the mysterious, with the dark and difficult, being willing to take on difficult, hard topics and not turn and just run away. So there's already kind of that bent. The third house, you can see on the inside circle here, these sections of the chart are numbered from 1 all the way around to 12. These represent the astrological houses. Don't worry a ton about what that means. That's a more complicated concept for another time. But the sun being in the third house here represents the importance of siblings and relatives and sort of the place you're from, your community, and that will play a strong. It will influence your life in a strong way. Part of who you are is because of your family, because of those. Even typically when I see people with sun in the third house, they stay in touch with friends from their childhood. It's like that childhood, those people you meet during that time are really formative for you, which
Yeah.
is, and a
Yeah.
lot of those relationships tend to be then maintained over time as well. It also strikes me that we have Mars over here, red fiery Mars. And we can see Mars is in the seventh house in Gemini. So the seventh house represents partnerships. And typically, we all have various relationships with various people in our lives. But the seventh house specifically represents very close one on one partnerships. So this absolutely represents significant others, romantic partnerships. It also represents, close business partnerships, like if you have a shared business with someone. But these are not passing relationships. These are kind of really deep relationships that you invest a lot in. And Mars is the planet of war. And Mars is the planet, and we all have Mars somewhere. Again, Mars didn't just disappear poof into thin air at the time when anyone was born. But Mars in the seventh indicates
Right.
some friction, needing to really stand up for yourself, needing to, some people just, all the right people show up around them and they can just float through life. This indicates
Right.
needing to
Right.
stand up for yourself, and that there may be people you find yourself in closer relationships with who aren't respecting your boundaries, who aren't treating you the way you deserve to be treated, and you having to sort of stand up for yourself, defend yourself. Mars also is the planet, sometimes you need to cut ties with people, and not have them in your life anymore. And
Right.
so, and this is all also in Gemini. Yes,
So,
go for it, Christy. I could just ramble on
so I was,
forever.
no, no, no. So I was going to say, so this actually then shows my first marriage, my ex being difficult. It shows that difficult relationship that I have with my mom,
Mm,
but it also shows, going back, the very close friends that I have, like Mindy, having been a friend of her. I mean, I'm 40,
yeah,
48 years old. We've been friends for like 47
yeah.
years. Eva and I have been friends for, 35 years. So a lot of who I am really is showing up. And this is what Karena was talking about when she was saying there's a lot of intimate things showing up. So friction between, like needing to stand up for yourself. Well, sometimes you can need to stand up for yourself because you are, in a sense where, it could be abusive. Now, my mother did not abuse me. Okay. But it is a tricky relationship, and there is things that you definitely have to stand up for. So this is and the first time Karina and I talked about this, a lot of things that I thought was just my upbringing is in here. And she's like, oh, it's this and that. And I'm like, wait, what? So I just wanted to kind of point that out for everybody so that, we can start kind of connecting these storylines to my life.
I
So
love that.
go
And
ahead.
please,
This is exciting. I love it.
interrupt me at any point, Christy, with anything you are comfortable sharing about your personal life and yeah, your thoughts based on what
Yeah.
we're saying and your personal life. But again, only in so much as you feel comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Another thing that strikes me really strongly is we have Venus down here in the second house, uh, pretty closely conjunct Mercury. Conjunct just means they're on top of each other. And of course, they're not actually on top of each other in the sky,
Mhm.
but from the perspective of us on Earth looking up at the sky, they look like
Mhm.
they are on top of each other. So Mercury is the planet of communication.
Mhm.
It's the planet of talking and relating and expressing ideas and opinions. And it's right next to Venus, which is the planet that defines our relationships and communities and friends. It's Venus does not want to be in an isolated silo. Venus wants to be talking to people, relating to people, being with people. And so there's a strong indication here of just the importance of relationships and talking and like real talking, real communication in those relationships. And this is also in your second house.
Mhm.
The second house traditionally is the stuff we have. our money, our physical possessions. And so oftentimes the second house represents what we do for a job, what we do to get money and to get other physical things. And so, even this podcast,
Mhm.
YouTube channel, Christy, it just feels so resonant where you're relating to people, you're really building a community, you're
Right.
doing it through talking and communicating. But then, this is also,
Mhm.
you're viewing this as a job, and this is ramping up. Um,
Yeah.
and this is all in the second
Mhm.
house in
Absolutely.
Capricorn. And Capricorn is the house, the zodiac sign of discipline and being willing to kind of put in the hard work.
Mhm.
Um, in astrology, Capricorn is
Mhm.
represented by the symbol of the sea goat. So it has a goat's head and then a fish's
Mhm.
tail. So it's kind of a mythological creature. And Capricorn, the sea goat, is
Right.
tasked with climbing a mountain, which is a lot easier for a goat who does not have a fish tail than a goat who does have a fish tail. And so Capricorn just has resilience,
Right.
pushes through difficulties, and continues to climb the mountain. And so again, there's this sense of not giving up at the
Mhm.
first sign of difficulty, really being resilient and disciplined
Yeah.
and continuing to climb the mountain every day, waking up and climbing the mountain. It,
Right. And I just want to say too, knowing Venus is in my it or Venus, yeah, Venus is in Capricorn. It's not the most lovely place to be,
yes.
right? I mean, Capricorn is very earthy energy. If we go to tarot, Capricorn is represented by the
Yep.
devil card. So for me, those more intimate relationships are very difficult for me, without getting too far into the weeds about it, um, because it's not this natural, like, really lovey. As a mom, I was like, oh, hey, okay, like, figure this out. I'm going to give you space. As a wife, I'm not that wife that when you come through the door, I'm going to, like, jump into your arms and kiss you all over, and oh my god, that's not who I am. And I struggled with that a lot, you guys. So when I learned that Venus was in Capricorn for me, it made sense of why it was hard, but it also showed me why, again, Venus being in Capricorn, why I stayed longer in those more difficult relationships that I needed to stand up for
Mm,
myself in, because I don't just quit. I don't just give up. And the one thing that my dad said to me, when I was divorced, and I have really written this on my heart. He said, no one can say you didn't try. And that to me meant the world, because it meant that I had tried a
mm,
lot, and it took a lot for me to get there. So in one way it's good, because I'm like, we're gonna climb this hill. But in another way, when you want somebody that's like soft and squishy and lovey, you just as well go hug a tree. I mean, and I joke about it, but I can understand that, and so I don't take it so personally anymore like I
mm.
used to. I learned that it had to, I really have to work through it. So I wanted to
Oh,
interject that too, because I mean, I am kind of very contradictory.
yeah. Yeah, and we'll get into this too, in multiple areas, Christy, and I think we've talked about before, your chart is
Yeah,
contradictory. And, some people have charts where
yeah,
everything kind of just aligns and it's like, oh, this is what I'm doing. This is how I am. This is how I always interact with people. But Christy, you do have a lot of push and pull energy. And in some ways, that's just amazing because that brings
yeah.
balance. Whereas the people who are one dimensional, life generally feels easier,
Mhm.
but there are whole facets that they aren't really able to
Right,
explore because they just don't understand those. Whereas, you will be
right, right.
experiencing all of the different things, but then feel that tug between am I having a swordsy day or am I having a lovey day? It is very unclear, and so there is a lot of that energy. And I thank you so much for sharing. It also, as you're talking, um,
Yeah.
Saturn over here is in Cancer in the eighth house, and your moon is in Cancer. And I want to talk about this for a minute because we can see that this Saturn, there are red
Yeah.
lines between it and your Venus and Mercury in Capricorn. So these are on exactly opposite sides of the Earth at the time that you were born. So Venus and
Hmm.
Mercury over
Hmm.
here on this side, on the very opposite side, Saturn. And Saturn rules Capricorn, the
Right.
sign of Capricorn. And so
Mhm.
the ruler of this Venus and Mercury, not only are they in Capricorn, but the ruler of these two planets, this sign of Capricorn, is in the eighth house in Cancer. And the eighth house represents, again, kind of like we talked about your sun being at the bottom of the chart, born in the middle of the night, comfortable with the deeper, darker
Yeah.
things. The eighth
Right.
house is all about
Right.
specifically those deeper, darker things. So the eighth house represents
Mhm.
oftentimes the esoteric, the strange experiences we can't fully explain. It represents things like physical or
Right.
emotional death, sex, all of those really big topics that human beings go through.
Mhm.
And so,
Mhm.
Saturn being
Mhm.
in that place, opposing your Venus and Mercury, there is that sense of um, a depth and intensity to you in your relationships. Um, Normally, like if I see Venus
Mhm.
and Mercury together in, say, Gemini, you just get like a super chatty, friendly, bubbly person. But when they are opposing
Uh-huh.
Saturn in the eighth house, there there is a gravity to it where just talking about the light, fluffy stuff, just doing the small talk and talking about the weather isn't going to cut it. It's not going to satisfy that really deep, intense eighth house. And with the eighth
Right.
house being in Cancer and your moon also right here in Cancer with Saturn, Cancer is the nourishing, um, kind of stereotypically maternal sign, the caretaking sign. And for people who have Cancer in the eighth house, um, there's sort of a like the feelings run so deep you can't easily access them. They're not hanging out at the surface. I
Yeah.
loved your example so much of like, yeah, if you're looking for someone who's going to meet you at the door and cover you with kisses and jump into your arms, that's not me. And again, that's so
I'm not your chick.
yeah, but that's so the symbolism is just so perfect for this because it's like to connect on that
Yeah.
deeper, nurturing, caretaking,
Mhm.
supporting each other level, there has like you have to
Mhm.
go way down.
Mhm.
Nothing is going to be instantaneous or on the
Yeah.
surface. It is going to be coming from a place of like deep discussion and soul level connection um,
Mhm.
and then with the moon here as well, I always find it really interesting in charts that have the moon and Saturn in the same sign, because in many ways, the moon and Saturn are opposite each other. The moon, first of all, is the
Right.
fastest
Right.
moving, it's not a planet, but the fastest moving celestial body in our night sky. Every month, the moon goes all the way around the zodiac and comes back again. It goes from new to full, back to new. So it's the fastest moving celestial
Right.
body in our chart. Up until telescopes were invented and we discovered there was a Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, for thousands of years, the furthest planet we could see with the naked eye was Saturn. And so we thought Saturn was sort of the end of
Mhm.
our solar system. And the further out
Right.
planets are from the sun, the slower they move. So for thousands of years, the moon was the fastest thing in the birth chart, Saturn was the slowest. So there's this difference in speed,
Hmm.
and the moon is emotional, it's
Yep.
changeable, it's fluid. Again, every night we look at the moon and we're like, oh, it's a full moon tonight. Oh, it's a quarter moon tonight. Oh, it's just a waning crescent tonight. It's
Right.
so changeable. And Saturn is not emotional. Saturn is
Yeah.
disciplined and rigid and going to stick to the plan, long-term thinking, not going to change every night the way the moon does. And so there's really, as you were talking about earlier, Christy, there's that push and pull of different energies where there is that desire to connect with people deeply and emotionally. But at the same time, with Saturn there, there's
Hmm.
a little bit of like, ooh, yeah, get that far away from me. That feels too emotional, too vulnerable, too gooey
Yes.
fuzzy. Let's just get back to the plan.
And that is me. And I am not, some people are like, I'm a hugger. Dude, I'm not. You want to see the most awkward face ever? Come at me with open arms. And I'm like, uh, you know, now it's not that I won't hug people. When I was a makeup artist, women, I would do their makeup. And fortunately, they'd be like, can I hug you? They would just be, and I'm like, sure. And I think make it quick, smile, make it good, because it really isn't who I
Mm,
am. And I tell a lot of people, if you want to know who I'm attracted to, like not just, guys that I'm attracted to, but people I'm attracted to, put a bunch of people in a room. It's not going to be the person you think.
mm,
It's going to be the person that can make me laugh, that I can have those deep conversations with, that understands me. I mean, I don't necessarily like you guys. I have a good looking husband, but that's it, I wouldn't care what he
mhm.
looked like. He would have to be able to have those conversations. And I think one thing that has always stuck out that you said, Karina, and I hope I'm not
Go
jumping
for
ahead
it.
of you, but is that my sun and my moon don't see each other, and they're so different. And so it's whereas some people's sun and moon can talk to each other, mine don't.
Mhm.
So when I do my tarot readings, when I do that, I literally have to, y'all, I've got to banish my ego. I have to literally, in my mind, set that aside and step into that Cancer energy. Because if I don't do that, then my message is very
Mm,
Saturnian. It's like, what are you doing? This isn't okay. Don't do this. And that's not how we ought to deliver messages to people. It needs to be loving.
mm,
So even in my own rituals, the way I have to do things, and I always did it that way, but I kind of didn't understand why I did it that way until I talked to Karina and I was like, I
mm,
get it. Even my creativity. It's like with plant, I will say, okay, I want this. I have no direction necessarily. And it's not because I don't, because I'm setting someone up to fail. It's just because I don't necessarily know. Like, until I have something in front of me and I can be like, okay, that's the direction or that's it, or no, not at all. So it can be difficult to work with me because I sort of can envision it in my head, but not really. So you have to kind of give me something and then I can go with it. That's why if somebody just sits down and like, do my makeup, I'm like, oh God. uh, um, okay, and that's why the creativity for me is fluid. Like I've got to start somewhere. But I'm also, I don't micromanage that either because I understand for me it's this very fluid process, and
mm,
I could start off thinking it's this thing over here and it ends up way up here and it's nowhere near what I thought. But that was very helpful to
mm.
me. So if you guys see me here and I'm like very, wise and everything, and then you might reach out to me after, and if you catch me in the middle of cooking dinner, I'm like, what? Why? And you're like, well, who is this person? That's why.
I love that you brought that up and also that you mentioned your creativity because we're going to get to that. I don't think when we did your first birth chart reading, I don't think creativity came up a lot. We were dealing with, I think, some more specific circumstances in your life at that
Oh,
point. We are getting to your
right.
creativity
Hmm.
shortly, though.
Yep.
One thing I do just want to say for people, yeah, it's completely true that Christie's sun and moon can't see each other. So we have her sun down here at 22 degrees of Aquarius. We have her moon up here at 8 degrees of Cancer. And with zodiac signs that have nothing in common, and I'll define what that is in a minute, they can't relate to each other. It's almost as though they look right past each other and do not see each other. So Aquarius is air. The moon is not. It is in Cancer, which is water. Aquarius is a fixed sign. Cancer is a cardinal sign, not the same. We actually had a YouTube video a while ago where we talked about cardinal, fixed, and mutable. So if anyone is
Yeah.
not sure what those modes are, there's a video for that on Christie's channel.
Check it out.
And Aquarius is traditionally a yang or more active sign. The moon is a yin or more passive sign. So there's just kind of this energy of they don't have any common ground. They don't work in the same way. Not the same element, not the same mode. One's yin and one's yang. So yeah, this is sort of where this is coming from, that they don't see each other. They have no way to relate. Like we've all met people like that where we're like, I'm sure you are a wonderful person, but I don't get you at all. And it's almost like Christie's sun and moon are sort of doing that, where they're like, okay, you're cool, but I don't understand you at all. So there is, with people who have the sun and moon in this relationship to each other, there is typically a process of at any given point choosing consciously or subconsciously which one gets to be active and gets to sort of win and drive in that moment. And it could differ based on the hour, the day, the month, the year. But yeah, there's that really strong energy of just like, we may like each other sort of, but we don't understand each other. We don't see things the same way at all. Okay.
And I like that you mentioned that, because when I cry, I'm like, why am I doing
Oh,
this? And you guys, I'm not anti-emotion or anything, but I'm just like, stop it. This is getting you nowhere. Quit. Sort yourself out, you know. Then that I have to set that side apart. I've got to put that part of me aside and say, no, you have to cry this out, because if you don't, it gets stuck in your body, and then it gets really icky. So even within myself, and if if you know me really well, you'll see that conflict
mm.
of like, or you'll see me crying. I'm like, I'm fine,
And it's
and
the
then
Aquarius
I just
sun and
go
Cancer
on. But
moon
it's because
arguing.
it it is, and I tell you what, that Aquarius side kicks in on me, and I'm just like, mm.
So there's one more thing I want to talk about before we get to your creativity, which I want to get to as well. So
Yeah.
all of you, everybody here, I think, loves and appreciates Christie so much. And one of the things that I just love about you, Christie, is regardless of what happens, you somehow bring this unfailing optimism, this like, we're going to make our own world. We're going to move things forward and turn it into what we want. And, it can be easy for people to sort of like hang out in those really difficult places and just be like, I don't know how to find my way out of this. But it's like, somehow
Right.
the whole time I've known you, it's like you can always see a light at the end of the tunnel somewhere, and you're going to keep going until you find that light. And if we look over here on the left side of the
Right.
chart, we have Neptune right on the ascendant in Sagittarius. And Sagittarius, friends, that is the sign of optimism. Create the world you want. Don't be content with the world you're living in. Go
Mm-hmm.
create the one you want. For
Mm-hmm.
people who have Sagittarius ascendants, the way Christie does, they will have this approach to life that's like, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to make it work. I don't care how many people tell me I can't do it. I'm just going to make it happen. And with Neptune on the ascendant
Right.
too, Neptune represents dreams, our fantasies, what we can imagine. And so there's this sense of not just the unfailing optimism, but also the ability to dream big. Some people have the optimism, but
Mhm.
don't have the imagination to really picture what kind of a world they could create. But with that Neptune on the ascendant
Uh-huh.
in Sagittarius, it's like you have that optimism, and you have the imagination to dream about, yeah, this is what I want my world to look like. This is what I want the world to look like. And I
Okay.
love that placement so much. I see this yeah, I see this so strongly in you. And just as a little side note for people who are new to birth charts, oftentimes we come across to people, we sort of lead with our rising sign more than our sun. This is not true of everybody. If you look at
Mhm.
each chart, you can see what the most important planets are and what will kind of lead a person's life and the way they will present themselves in the world. But for you, Christy, yeah, this Sagittarius ascendant with Neptune right there is so strong.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of why when I end my show, I always say, "Go conquer your world as only you can.
Oh,
We'll be here to help
I
you light the
forgot that you
way."
said
You
that, but
know,
that is
it's
perfect. Neptune on the ascendant in Sagittarius, 100%. That's so perfect.
yep.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about your creativity. So, our creative endeavors
Okay.
show up in the fifth house. And you have Jupiter in the fifth house, and you have Chiron. If people aren't familiar with Chiron, it's not a planet, it's an asteroid, but it was one of the first asteroids discovered and named. And I don't read Chiron for everyone because it isn't equally important in all charts. But because you have it so close to Jupiter, and Jupiter also rules Sagittarius, which is your first house. So this Jupiter is the ruler of your ascendant, of that Neptune. It actually is pretty important for you.
Mhm.
And so Jupiter is a planet that brings expansiveness. So, and all of this in your fifth house is in Aries. Aries is that initiatory, like Nike, just do it energy, where it's like, don't procrastinate, don't sit here, get up and do it. And again, Jupiter is going to bring that expansiveness
Mhm.
of, yeah, what kinds of big, cool things can I do? And in the Hellenistic times, probably around like 100 BCE to probably 4 or 500 AD, um, astrologers sort of had a saying that if you see an indication of something once in the chart, it's possible. If you see two indications for something in a chart, it's probable. And if you see three indications in a chart, it's certain. And even as we're already talking about, we're getting this sense of Christie as a very big picture, optimistic thinker who's a go getter, kind of bringing their energy out to the world. Um, and so, I look at this Neptune on the ascendant in Sagittarius, I look at this Jupiter conjunct Chiron in Aries, and I just see both of these as signatures of a really strongly optimistic person who's going to bring forth her creative energy to the world. Um, and let me just talk about the meaning of Chiron for a moment. So, the energy of Chiron is the
Yeah.
energy of the wounded healer. And the idea behind this wounded healer is so if I back way up from the mythology perspective, Chiron was an ancient mythological physician who could heal others and healed many, many, many
Mhm.
people. But then the tragic difficulty was
Mhm.
Chiron got wounded by a very special weapon and was unable to heal themselves. And so wherever Chiron falls in
Mhm.
each of our charts, there's this energy we need to heal in that area. There are wounds we have suffered that have not sort of closed over and healed. They're still raw. And when we are able to work through those deep parts of ourselves and heal those, then Chiron typically becomes a place where we help others heal. So wherever Chiron falls in our charts, there's a two-step process. One is we got to heal ourselves because we have a deep wound there. And then there's also the part of once we have healed that deep wound, how do we help others? How do we give back and help support others who are experiencing a similar wound? And this is all in your house of creativity. So there is that sense of your creative outlets and outputs being a strong source of healing for you. And then again, all of us, we continue to heal throughout our whole lives. Healing is not like a, whoa, I'm just done. So much for healing. But, you know, we do get to the point where we're able to really help other people start to heal in those areas as well. So, and yeah, I don't know, Christie, if there's anything you feel comfortable sharing or not. But I have less insight into the creative endeavors. Other than this YouTube
With
channel.
no. With so for me, creativity always has been how I heal and process my emotions, because typically, and I think I've shared this before, my husband, when we lived in Alaska, my husband bought a BMW for me. It was a Z4 BMW convertible. He was so excited to give this to me. He bought it. He was like, "Look at this thing I bought for you." And my first response, you guys, was, "We're still going to be in Alaska for another 2 months. This is in Denver. My mom's in Fort Collins. How are we going to get it home? How are we going to get the money? Oil changes are expensive. I used to have an Audi at one point. This is not cheap. What are we going to do?" And I just took this pen and like completely took the air out of his sails, because he was so excited to be able to buy this for me. So the creativity of it is how I heal that. So my side that most people see really kind of is that Aquarian side that's kind of swordsy, kind of to the point, kind of. That's why I say a lot of times, like, I don't know how to say this, or I don't mean it how it's going to sound. It just, sometimes there's no other way to say it than to just say it. So the way that I work through my emotions is through my creativity. I had done a junk journal for Karena. So you guys have seen my creative journal that I do, all of that stuff.
By the way.
So I had started that, and thank you. And I didn't really even know when I started it what I was going to do with it. I just wanted to see if I could do it. So I started it, and I was doing it. I was working on it. And at the time, I had a business venture that had failed. And I felt like my creativity was kind of being harvested to just be sold for profit. And so it was the first time I was ever creating anything again that wasn't going to be sold. There wasn't going to be a price tag on it. So that's how I healed myself to be able to be creative again. And so I'm going through and I'm doing all of this. And you guys, it was a big, thick, it's a thick journal. And I think I got 30 pages in out of, we'll say, 120 pages. And I'm like, I'm done. I had healed everything I needed to do. It was done. And so then I messaged Karena and I'm like, I have something for you. I'm going to send it to you. And so only the first half of it was done. And then I'm like, you get to finish the last half. Now, you could see it as my creativity ran out. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this, which was not the case. But it was that I had healed. And by the point that I got there, I was like, I don't know what to, and it's hard for me to sell my creativity because I'm not doing it for profit. I'm doing it to heal. So if you go back and you listen to the song Should Have Known on the channel, That was a song that I wrote, and I wrote it at a time where I really needed to work through
Mm.
something. And it's like, what happened to forever? This can't be the way. I mean, it really is a deep, deep, deep song. And but that's how I heal. So when you find that I am really being creative, when you see all of those journal things, when you see that, that's me healing.
Mm.
And it's because I can't put the words to it. Like, I can't just sit down and say, oh, I'm so heartbroken because of this. Because sometimes I don't necessarily know that.
Mm.
So that creativity is the way to let those emotions out in a way that I don't have to verbalize it, and I don't have to be vulnerable. It's not that I can't be vulnerable. I mean, I can very much be vulnerable, but it really it just kind of has to flow.
Yeah.
And that's why sometimes, I don't have any of that creative stuff to show you guys. And then other times I'm like, look at what I did, look at what I did, look
Yeah.
at what I did, but I'm always kind of collecting it. And it's just and you'll see that my stuff is, and and again, this is another part of me being polar opposite. When people see me, they're like, oh, she's light and airy and da, da, da. But then you look at like the words to that song or some of the stuff that I do, and it is deeper. The songs that I write are really emotional because it's me working through it. And so you have to find a way to lighten that. Um,
Mm.
so I'm more likely to make something, and like I said, Karena wasn't even a part of what I was trying to heal in myself. She wasn't a part of the business or anything, but I had to do that to be able to know that I could be creative again
Mm.
and not have somebody putting a price tag on it. Because up until that point, for like the last year, everything I did was, we could sell that. We could make this much money on it. We could do that. And every creative thing that I was doing had a price tag
Mm.
attached to it. And so that was the first thing where it was, and I mean, like I said, I did, I mean, I was really proud of how it looked. Like, you guys, I baked the paper in the oven.
So
I mean,
gorgeous.
I hand glued all this stuff. It was so much fun to do. But I got to, and I was like, okay, you got to finish this. I don't know what the rest of this is going to look like, but here you go, have fun. And but it healed me. And so, and I don't have to profit from that. I just have to
Mm.
get it out. And so that's where my photography comes from. My dad and my uncles are amazing artists, and I can't draw. Um, but I can capture the beauty that I see with the camera, and I can share it with you guys. And that's how I share my life, is through words, through my writing, through my photography, through that. Otherwise, I'm just kind of like, okay, we got to do this, we got to do that. Did we do this? I need this. It's very kind of, and talking about Chiron and the wounded healer, one of the things that I found really helpful was going back to the point of tricky tricky relationships where you can be taken advantage of and where you have to stand up for yourself. Well, that is my wounded healer. That is what I'm here to do. It is to help people heal from that. So on a big level, I had to go through that so that I knew what that was like, so that when somebody comes to me, I can be like, I understand that. And you guys, I think this is probably the first time I've said this. My two youngest kids that I had with my ex-husband, when we divorced, they stayed with their dad because I couldn't emotionally manage all three kids. So they didn't live with me. But that was okay. It was hard, but one of the things my psychiatrist told me was that a good mom puts her kids in the best position to succeed. And that's where it was. And for a mom to not have two of her three kids living with her, that's a difficult place to be in. It's a tough thing to explain. And I found myself having to say a lot, look, I didn't get my kids taken away. It just was where I needed to, it's how it needed to look. I didn't know when all of that happened, when I divorced, that my dad was dying. And I hadn't seen my dad in 10 years. And there was a point where I was like, why is this happening to me? Well, it was a few years down the road that I realized if I hadn't divorced my ex when I did, and if my youngest kids hadn't stayed with him, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to spend the last 3.5 years with my dad. I
Mm.
would have not reconnected. I would have not gotten that. So there's a lot of stuff. When I tell people I don't look like my experiences, this is exactly what I'm talking about. It's these things that you're like, how did you forgive? Well, I forgave because that's my path in life.
Mm.
That's what put me on this path, to be here, to help people, to talk about these things. If it hadn't happened to me, we wouldn't have this.
Mm.
And so that's kind of that creative side and putting it all together. And I wanted to tie that creativity into the Chiron and
Mm.
into, kind of all of that. So everything that I've gone through, even though it has been really sticky, and if you know what you're looking at in the chart, you're like, "Ooh, um, yeah, I've been through some stuff," but it also means that I understand some stuff. I feel like that State Farm commercial. We cover, so we know some stuff because we've seen some stuff. Like that's kind of how I am. Well,
Mm.
chances are there's probably not a whole lot you're going to tell me I'm just going to be like, I've never heard that before in my life.
Oh,
you know? So,
we are
yeah.
so grateful to you for sharing, Christy, and I'm so sorry that, yeah, it sounds so difficult,
Oh,
and the
oh,
pulling a couple things out too from what you said. So the fifth house does also represent children, because children are one of our
mhm,
physical creative outputs as people. So again, thinking about how to, put them
yeah,
first. This is also all in Aries. Aries is kind of the warrior energy ruled by Mars. And yeah,
mhm,
and sometimes it's hard to be a warrior, and it's hard to do the best thing. It might not be what you
yeah,
want. And but yeah, kind of going through that
yeah,
experience, and then even using this channel and these deep conversations to kind of help people learn, grow, heal on their own as well. And you mentioned that all of this kind of came
yeah,
about um, after your divorce. And again, Mars up here in your seventh house of close partnerships, that rules Aries. So that
mhm,
rules that fifth house, that Chiron,
mhm,
that Jupiter. So it does make sense that a lot of your creative output um, would have come as a result of some relationship friction and problems and having to stand up for yourself. And
yeah.
um,
Mhm.
yes, okay. Um, Again, Christy, thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing, because
On that
I
nice light
because I
note.
know, well, and it's like I'm sort of thinking here, because the next thing I was going to bring up is it's not difficult. It's just there's a depth to it, and I'm like, how far in depth do we want to go here? But this is your channel. This is what you do.
Go, go.
Um, well, we have Pluto
Let's go.
over here in the upper left corner, and it's retrograde. You can see anything that where the
Right.
numbers are in red means it's retrograde. And this MC here is the midheaven. So at exactly the time that Christie was born, the midheaven is the point that is most directly overhead. For those of us not living at the equator, the calculations to calculate that get a little bit tricky. But basically, this is the point directly overhead at the time that you were
Mhm.
born. And having Pluto and the midheaven in Libra, there is this sense of, so Pluto is all about transformational depths. Pluto is not going to take the surface level
Mhm.
view of anything. Pluto is going to turn over every single stone and see what's underneath it
Mm,
and see if anything needs to be cleaned or fixed.
right.
And the midheaven really represents the way we present ourselves to the world externally. It's the highest point overhead at the time that we're born. And I even think about your channel and all of the things you're doing with this, and I'm sure all of the things you'll continue to do in the future. But it's like you're really bringing the deep transformation, the deep conversations. Um, this is sort of your public face to the world, is being willing to have these deeper conversations. And again, thinking back to the, if we see an indication of something once in the chart, possible, twice probable, three times certain, we've already got the Saturn and the moon
Mhm,
in Cancer in the eighth. We've got Pluto on the
mhm,
midheaven. We've got the sun at the very bottom of the chart, in the deepest part of night. So it's like all of this is basically spelling out someone
right.
whose um, public face to the world, whose work will be oriented around the deeper, darker, more difficult things. And then, all of that Chiron we were just talking about,
Mhm,
there is that sense. Anyone who's intimately familiar with the deep, dark things in life has been through some stuff. There's no way to be comfortable
mhm,
living in those and existing in those dark places without having been there multiple times. And so there is
yeah,
that sort of connection
yeah,
to,
yeah.
um, yeah, that Chiron in the fifth is really, there is a need for healing there, creativity being the vehicle to help provide that healing, and then being more comfortable being in those deeper,
Mhm,
more difficult places and conversations.
yeah, yeah. It, I'm not afraid to, and like you said, go wherever we need to go. We'll go there. It's fine.
Okay,
Good.
so it's also worth calling out that this Pluto, this retrograde Pluto, is at 11 degrees on the midheaven, and your ascendant is also at 11 degrees of Sagittarius. Neptune is close by at 13 degrees. This 60-degree angle between your Pluto and your ascendant and Neptune is called a sextile. And it's a supportive
Mhm,
angle where, how we talked about your sun and your moon don't see each other very well? Well, the sextile means they do see
right.
each other and they are going to help support each other. So we have this Sagittarius. I
Yay!
know,
Support.
right? Some nice positive, I don't want to call it, no energy with Pluto is easy exactly, because transformation is never easy. But
Right.
it's definitely supportive. And so we have this ascendant, this eternal
Mhm,
optimism, going to push forward to the light at the end of the tunnel. This Neptune on the ascendant, being able to imagine the world you want to create and think big. Pluto is here to help transform you
right.
until you get there. Um, and I think, what's so
Mhm,
interesting with all of us as humans is, ideally, we're born, we go through life, we have some experiences, we learn, we grow, we transform, we become better versions of ourselves, better humans. And but some people
mhm,
really struggle to do that. Some people struggle to be self-aware, or to even recognize there are areas they need to work
yeah.
on themselves or learn and grow. And again, Christy, I just see all of the incredible growth in you and all of the things you have been through. And even though so many of those situations have been so difficult, none of them went to waste.
Mhm,
It's like all of them you use to
right.
transform and continue to become the best version of yourself. And I really see that as this Pluto
Mhm,
sextiling your ascendant and Neptune. This transformation and the eternal optimism, the moving forward, the having a big dream for yourself, those are going to support each other. And so it's almost like they're ping ponging a ball back and forth. And Pluto is going to help keep you incrementally transforming until you get there. So I love that energy too, because it's
yeah.
just so indicative of all of the experiences you've already had and how they've already helped you change and grow.
Yeah, yeah, and you guys, for people who know me, I mean, my life is crazy, but it's some of the stuff that I've gone through, with kids, with grandkids, with stepkids. Some of it, most of you guys don't know the depths of it because I can't talk about it on the internet out of respect for them. But there is a lot of stuff that runs really deep and is really tricky. And I think that the difficult part of this for me is I see that. I see that kind of ickier side of things.
Mhm.
And you don't want to be right about those icky things. And and when you are, you almost feel bad. It's like you apologize for being right. But I can kind of see some of that. And so, we were talking about this today. How do you share messages that are difficult? Well, sometimes it's not my message to
Mm.
share. It's mine to be there when the message gets delivered and the person falls. And then I'm like, okay, come on, you know what? Let's go. And there's been a lot of times, it happened with my husband not too long ago. He's like, can't believe I didn't see this for 10 years. I didn't see this. Look, it doesn't matter that you didn't see it for 10 years. What matters is you see it now. And so let's go
Mm.
forward. Like we can't fix it. We can't change who this person is. We can't change the experiences. We can change how we manage it and go forward. And and that's really all you can do
Mm.
sometimes. Sometimes you have to just kind of sit and wait for it to fall because it's not your message to give. It's not yours to, it's just like if you have a knowing and you're like, oh, I kind of feel like maybe this is not going to go well. Well, sometimes you just sit back and you support the person because they're going to need you
Mm.
when they fall.
Yeah.
And and there's a lot of that in my life too.
Yeah.
And I'm laughing about it. I don't think it's funny, but there's I think this is so important because when we can understand ourselves, when
Mm.
we can understand this part of us, then we know how to help.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, I don't know how to be there for this person, I do know how to be there for this. It's like a statistic that I learned. Now, I don't know it for men, but for women, on average, a woman, if she's going to leave a bad situation, she will leave between 5 and 8 times before she actually
Mm.
leaves. So if a woman comes to me and she's like, and I'm like, have you left before? And she's like, oh, once before. You guys, I know I've got at least 4 more times of her leaving and coming back before it gets to that point. If she's like, I've left 6 times, okay, we're getting somewhere. So it's knowing that. And it's not fun stuff to know, but I know it because I went through it because I did that. You know, I left and then came back and then left and then came back and then left and then came back. So I know what that looks like. So, um, like Karina said, that darker side of things, I'm a little more comfortable in. Take me into a huggy rainbow room, and I'm like, oh God, why? You hate me, don't you? Where's the escape door? No, I mean I can be huggy and light and rainbows, but
There is some element of that, right?
but
Where
yeah,
again, we see in so many ways in your chart your comfort with that deeper, darker place in a way that other people might have more comfort with the huggy, fuzzy wuzzy kind of energy. Every person
yeah,
is different. And yeah, I just so appreciate how that Pluto in the 11th house is basically sextiling your ascendant and
mm,
Neptune, just helping you continue to iterate and grow and continue to iterate and grow, and then use all of that to help others grow as well. It's not like you are turning over every rock, learning
yeah,
all about yourself, and then calling it good. Again, having this Jupiter over here On
Right.
top of the Chiron, that wounded healer, Jupiter does expand. Jupiter brings benefic energy. And it's almost like you're sort of bringing that. Like, yes, the wounded healer is difficult, but Jupiter right there, you're going to heal, and you're going to bring that healing to others as well. Okay,
Yeah.
clearly everybody can
Yeah.
probably see that it takes a while to read a birth chart, and frankly, and I still want to get into transits today, and I'm aware of time, but
Oh yeah. Yeah. We
okay,
got time.
awesome,
Oh no,
awesome.
I got time.
And I want to be clear too. We are just barely scratching the surface, people. Like,
Yeah.
there is so much. I have barely gotten into aspects. This sextile is the only one we've even talked about. Every single one of these lines in the middle represents an aspect. This is
Mhm.
why, our chart isn't meant to be something that we sort of look at, we figure it all out in an afternoon. This is our whole life, and sort of
Mhm.
learning about the different pieces of
Yeah.
this. It's all a journey. And I know for myself, since of course I've read my own chart multiple times, there are pieces where when I was younger, they didn't make sense. And I was like, I don't think
Mhm.
that's me. But then, you live a little bit, you learn some things, you have some experiences, you
Yeah.
change as a result. And then you find yourself 5 years further on and you're like, oh, that is me. And and that's why I think it's
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
challenging reading for people who are too young, because there's like most of their chart hasn't happened yet. Most of the big some formative experiences for
Right.
sure have happened, but they still have so much life ahead of them, to have all of these experiences, and who knows
Yeah.
all of the ways that they will kind of morph and change as a result. Okay, that was a little bit of an interlude.
Right. Uh,
Let's now look at the transits. Um, and nobody
okay.
should panic that it looks more complicated. Is everybody agreed? No panicking? Because it's actually not much more complicated. No
No panic.
panicking. Yes, that is what I want. Again, the eternal optimism, Christy. All right. So, um, let me walk through this really quickly, just so, again, people are not like, oh my gosh, there's even more things. The inner peach colored wheel is exactly Christie's chart that we just spent the last hour plus looking at. So that should not be scary to anybody. Again,
Mhm.
we can see her sun down here at 22 degrees of Aquarius. We talked about her Mars in the seventh. All of this should look super familiar. In the outer aqua colored
Mhm.
circle, this is where the planets are right now. So, for example, right now,
Mhm.
um, we are in Libra season, which some people might know. The sun is in Libra. And here we have the sun at 15 degrees of Libra. This little uh, teal colored symbol is Libra. We also just had an eclipse. If people might remember, we had a total solar eclipse last week. Eclipses happen when the sun is near the north and south moon node. And you can see that the sun is close to the south moon node, which is why we had a total solar eclipse. So again, don't worry about these exact symbols.
Right.
The main point I want to get across is that none of this is scary, even though there's a lot more symbols. So this inner part is what we just spent an hour looking at.
Right.
The outer part is literally just the sky right now, right now. So we're all good. Okay, Ben reserves the right to panic. I love that. All right, Ben, just for you,
He always. I
just for you, Ben, you may reserve the right to panic.
right.
No one else, though, is allowed to panic. Only one person can panic per episode. So, if we look at this, again, remember how I spoke in the very beginning about our birth chart lasts for our whole life, but it's a static moment in time when we are born. As the planets continue to move and hit these points in our chart, they kick things off and things start to happen. So if we look at Christie's chart, there are several things that stand out to me immediately. First of all, down here at the bottom, very bottom of the chart, we've already talked about how deep, and sort of dark, and a lot of stuff being dug up there. We have Saturn and Neptune moving through Christie's fourth house. And the fourth house represents our home and our living situation.
Mm.
And so typically when people have big planets like these, Saturn takes about 3 years to go through a sign. So it spends about 3 years in Pisces. Neptune spends about 14 years in a sign. So Neptune has been in Pisces for about the last 14 years. So there's definitely an added
Oh, wow.
emphasis on what is a home?
Mhm.
What is my home? What does it take for me to feel at home?
Uh-huh.
How do I have to decorate my space and set up my space so that it feels like home? But there's an intense focus there on all of those
Right.
types of things. And obviously, I know right now you've been doing a lot of traveling and RV, and for sure, again, that calls into question, what is a
Right.
home? Because now my home
Yeah.
moves and is on wheels. Um, but again, even before that started, Saturn and Neptune, Saturn's been in Pisces for probably the last 2 years, Neptune for, yeah, like the last 13 or 14 years. So just a lot of questions and focus in your
Mhm.
life around what does a home even mean to you? And then just so you're aware, oh,
And
go ahead.
that's, oh, I was going to say, and that's very true because Michael and I have been married for 10 years. I was on the road with him for 6 years. And is that right? For 5 years, 5 years. And then I was in Kentucky for 5 years.
Mm,
So 5 years I lived in hotels, tents, a
mm,
car, a couple of times. And then I had a home that I decorated. And
mm,
then now I gave up the home and now I have an RV. So my idea of home has changed a lot. What it looked
mm.
like, whether it was a one person tent or a Hilton hotel, or there were a couple of times you always slept in the car. So it really, home to me has changed. What it was when I was a little girl is not how I see home now.
Mm,
I can, I can make my home anywhere, because I understand that it's not the thing, it's not the structure, it's the people and the fur babies
mm.
that are the home. Um, so I don't have to have that home. Um, it's not traditional. So very much.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Um, and one thing I want to call out is that because Saturn moves so much faster than Neptune, both of these planets are going to move
Mhm.
into Aries, out of Pisces and into Aries at about the same time in March of 2025. So this big 14-year
Okay.
Neptune house thing, this couple of year Saturn house home thing. And again, that doesn't mean that you have like no home or there's no focus on home, but the intense
Oh yeah.
focus is going to shift. As both of these
Hmm.
planets move into Aries, this is going to shift into your fifth house of creativity. And so, the same way you've been
Ooh.
sort of working through what is a home? Does it look like what I thought it would? I've lived in all these different places,
Hmm.
hotels and a
Hmm.
house and an RV, and sort of having all of these experiences that lead you toward your definition of what a home it means to you. That energy moves into your fifth house of creativity. So, and again, we've got that
Oh,
Chiron
okay.
there. um, in your natal chart, in your birth
Mhm.
chart, we've got Chiron and Jupiter there. So, whenever we have big outer planets like Saturn and Neptune moving through a place in our chart that also has birth planets there, it kind of lights up those areas.
Mhm.
So, some of the Chiron wounded healer using that creativity to help others heal, using it to help yourself heal and then help others heal, that
Mhm.
is really going to ramp up over the next, starting in
Oh, okay.
March of 2025. Um, Also, as this is happening, you can probably notice that here's Chiron in your natal chart, 24 degrees of Aries. Here's where Chiron is now, 21 degrees of Aries. You are very close to your Chiron return. And we call it a return whenever something makes its way all the way around the zodiac and back to the location where you were born. Um, and so in
Uh-huh.
May of 2025, this will be exactly your Chiron return. So it will hit 24 degrees. You can see it's retrograding right now, so it's going to retrograde back a little bit and then continue forward. But by May of 2025, you're going to have that Chiron return. By that point, Saturn and Neptune are also both going to be in your fifth house of creativity. So you're going to kind of have a stacked fifth house, all oriented around healing and using that healing to express your creativity, kind of that outpouring outlet for yourself, but also for others. You know,
Mhm.
um, and it could be that oftentimes when the Chiron return comes around, it's sort of an expansion
Mhm.
of things you've already seen with little Chiron moments. And especially with Jupiter right here next to Chiron in your natal chart, Jupiter expands. So
Uh-huh.
again, super expecting this to expand.
Uh-huh.
This could look like anything. You get to live it out and see exactly what happens. But the kinds of things this could look like is, for example, you used that song, Should Have Known. You used writing that as a way to heal.
Mhm.
Maybe you do more with music. Maybe you create a
Mhm.
whole album. It could look like doing
Okay.
more with this channel. You're
He's
already helping people heal through the conversations on this channel. Maybe there are ways you expand and grow this
Mhm.
in bigger ways. But for sure, by,
Mm.
again,
Okay.
starting March 2025, when Saturn and Neptune move in, and then really hitting hard in May 2025, when you get that Chiron return, there's just a lot of energy here. And you can see that Chiron right now is on the same degree as your Jupiter, 21 degrees Aries, 21 degrees Aries.
Uh-huh.
So Chiron is already trying to start expanding and bringing that good benefic energy to your output of creativity and turning that into something bigger. Also, yeah.
So this doesn't mean that I'm going to have a bunch of shit blow up in my life, right? It doesn't mean a bunch of stuff's going to blow up. It means the stuff that I've already went through is going to expand and get bigger, and I'll be able to help more people through it,
You're like,
right?
right,
Is that right
right.
or
You're,
no?
you're like, no,
Or is it
no
going to blow up?
bombs blowing up, right, right. You'd be surprised. This comes up all the time in birth chart readings. People, they're like, wait, yeah, my life isn't going to completely blow up, right? Um, so there's nothing with this placement to indicate a blowing up. This is very specifically your house of creativity.
Oh,
You're
good.
like, oh
Okay.
God, what a relief.
Awesome.
What a relief.
Okay, I can handle creativity. Bring it on.
Well, and there will probably be ways that you will be,
I could handle the other,
yeah,
but
there will probably be ways you are really challenged to sort of, again, with Saturn moving in, Saturn is that
okay.
planet of discipline, hard work. Neptune, we already talked about, is that planet of kind of our dreams, our fantasies, our visions, what we can imagine. And so what I really would anticipate this looking like
Mhm.
is um, you have had all of these experiences and you've been working to heal and learn and grow from those. And there are probably ways where you aren't using creativity to express all of those learnings yet. So it's like there are pieces
Oh,
that have
cool.
happened, like
Okay.
should have known was a very specific healing from a
Mhm.
very specific
Mhm.
thing. But there are other healings and
Mhm.
learnings
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
don't have a creative outlet yet. So what I would anticipate this looking like is that Saturn
Gotcha. Okay.
discipline, the Neptune, like, what can I imagine? How can I bring
Mhm.
all of these experiences out into a way that is helpful to the world? Um, Yeah, so that's what I would anticipate it looking like. It's
Okay.
that type of energy, like taking your experiences and
Nice.
expanding upon them and bringing them out in new ways. Also,
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Also, in case anyone has missed the memo, Pluto is changing signs. Pluto is the slowest moving planet, way, way far out there. It spends on average about 20
Right.
years in a sign. It has been in Capricorn for about 16 years. And next month, November 19th, it is moving out of Capricorn for good into Aquarius, where it will spend the next 20 years. No big deal, right? Just the next 20 years.
Uh-huh.
But what's really relevant about this
Right.
for
Right.
you, Christy, is first of all, it has recently gone over your Venus and Mercury in Capricorn at these end degrees of Capricorn. And again, we're seeing, like, even through this
Mhm.
YouTube channel, for example, how that those Plutonian depths have been such a part of the way you've been relating to people
Mhm.
and communicating with people. So it's like we've already started seeing what
Okay.
that looks like. As Pluto moves into Aquarius, over the next 20 years, it's going to move closer and closer to your sun, right? Because your sun is in Aquarius.
Okay. Okay.
And what's really interesting about
Mhm.
Pluto, I personally find Pluto fascinating, everyone. Like, yeah, Pluto is just unbelievable. One interesting thing about Pluto is it takes 250 years for Pluto to go all the way around the zodiac. What that means is Pluto won't go over everyone's sun. Does that make sense? So, for example, Pluto is here.
Oh,
If
okay.
if your
Yeah.
sun is in, say, Leo over here, it's going to take like 125 years to get
Mhm.
there. So, in this lifetime, someone with the sun in Leo will not
Uh-huh.
have Pluto go over their sun at all. So, um, having
Okay.
Pluto going over your sun is something not everybody experiences in their lifetime. What it looks like, again,
Oh, some
some
extra.
extra. So there is an incredible, we've already talked about how Pluto has that strong, intense, transformative energy. When and our the sun
Mhm.
in our
Mhm.
chart
Mhm.
represents our self, kind of our ego, and I don't mean ego in a bad way. I mean ego as our literal sense of self, as opposed to
Right.
the rest of the world. Um, and in the same way that the sun
Right.
is the center of our solar system and all of the other planets revolve around it, the sun in our birth chart represents ourself, and all of the other planets rotate around it and support it. So when we have Pluto, this
Mm.
planet of
Okay.
deep transformation, moving over the sun, our sense of identity and self, there are typically huge realizations and just like shifts in the way we think about and view ourselves. So, for example, and I am
Okay.
making this up, Christy. I don't actually think this is what this is going to look like, especially since this is an Aquarius. I really don't think it's going to look like this. But for example, you don't
Right.
consider
Right.
yourself a fuzzy wuzzy, lovey dovey person. Maybe after Pluto goes over that sun, you will find some part inside of you where you're like, actually, I do want to meet someone at the door and throw my arms around them. Again, this is an Aquarius, which is not the
Right.
most feeling sign. If this were Cancer, I might be like, maybe, there's some transformation there.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so,
Right. Right.
so yeah, Aquarius is definitely a more intellectual, airy, logical sign, but just um, there are ways,
Mhm.
there are likely beliefs you have about yourself right now, which either are true right
Mhm.
now, but will not always be true, or
Mhm.
they may not even be
Okay.
true now. They may be things that other people have told you, society has told you. Um, you know, any number, we all have things impressed
Ah.
on us all of the time throughout our whole childhood and the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
But typically, when Pluto moves over the sun, you
Mhm.
learn new things about yourself. And there's this feeling of like, I didn't know this about myself. That's pretty amazing. Um, So it's
Oh,
such a
right.
beautiful,
Okay.
transformative time. The one thing I would caution is once Pluto moves into Aquarius for good, which again, November 19th, so a month, um,
Mhm. Mhm.
if, try not to hold too tightly to the pieces of your identity. Because as Pluto moves through Aquarius closer and closer to your sun over, it'll probably hit your sun probably, I don't know, 15 years ish from now. Exactly. As Pluto moves closer and
Okay.
closer to your sun, there will likely be pieces of yourself that you identify with. They feel like part of you that will start to get peeled back.
Mhm.
Um, and so when Pluto transits
Oh,
over things
okay.
like our sun and our moon, these really personal points, um, there's usually two reactions. One is people are like, oh, I'm learning, I'm changing, I didn't know this about myself, I'm like a butterfly, I'm, morphing. um,
Uh-huh.
the other response is when people are afraid of
Right.
change, they're like, no, I'm holding on to my identity, I'm not going to change, I'm going to put my fingers in my ears and I'm not going to listen to. And of
Right.
course all of us here know, Christy, that you are not that person. But just like our identity is a core deep part of us. So even for those of us who are okay with changing
Right.
and growing, it can feel like a lot. There may be core parts
Mhm.
of our identity that are sort of we're forced to re-examine and look at. And so as much as possible, keeping an open mind on who you are
Mhm.
over this upcoming time.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so then this could be now an example. Me like leaving the church and not being Christian anymore to now on this path, having to peel that back and figure out what that means for me, what that looks for me. How does Jesus fit into my life? How do these things fit into my life?
Absolutely.
So that type of
It,
thing
it
is going to continue. Like, so it's not it's like it already happened, but it's just that revisiting of it to get a deeper, more meaningful
It
lesson
could be,
from it.
for sure, it could be. So, it sort of depends
Okay.
on how much religion is intertwined in you with your identity. Some people identify
Mhm.
super strongly with religion, other people not so much. So it's not that this
Yeah,
is specifically going to
right.
um, change or morph your religious views. It's more that whatever the core parts of you are, whatever your core beliefs about yourself are,
Right.
those will be challenged. So if someone is not
Right.
particularly religious, it's not going to
Okay.
hit them in a religious, or maybe it hits them where now they are really religious. Maybe that's what that looks like for them.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, it's
Right.
it's changes in those core
Right.
that core set of
Well,
identity beliefs.
and that was a pretty big change for me because I did see myself as very religious for a long time. So having to untangle that was kind of a big deal. So
Mm.
um
When did
cool.
that
Well, I
start?
like things like that, like learning. uh 2018,
That's really interesting.
2017,
Yeah, that's
2018,
really interesting.
somewhere around
Yeah,
there.
because that would have been right around the time when Pluto was
Yeah.
just touching your Venus, just starting to touch your Venus,
Uh-huh.
um, and then moving on to your
Yeah.
Mercury. And the second house is all about our possessions, our money, typically also the things we can buy with our money, but it's anything that we have, which for some people does also mean
Uh-huh.
beliefs. Sort of, okay, I have this necklace, I
Right.
also have this belief.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do anticipate,
Right. Right.
I do
Right.
anticipate that the changes you felt from Pluto going over
Mhm.
Venus and Mercury in your second house are not going to be of the same
Mhm.
magnitude as Pluto moving over your sun. So it will be likely that
Like it'll be
it
more
will be
powerful.
more powerful. It but it could be the same type of energy because
Oh, wow.
you
Okay.
have had Pluto move over these two
Okay.
planets. So you do know what Pluto moving over your planets
Hmm.
feels like. But the sun is
Right.
more
Right. Right.
central
Right.
to you than Mercury and Venus are. And in
Okay.
some ways, Mercury and Venus are very relational.
Okay.
So if we take your example of church, um,
Hmm.
church is also, it is a set of beliefs, but
Hmm.
it's also a community and a set of people. If we go to a church
Right.
and these are all the people we know and
Hmm.
they believe the way we believe and it feels like this community,
Hmm.
um, that
Hmm.
feels more like the biggest part of what would have changed since like 2016 is thinking about who am
Hmm.
I relationally with everyone else if they do believe this and I believe something
Right.
different. Whereas
Hmm.
Pluto moving over your sun
Hmm.
is not going to be about other people at all. Not going to be about any communities, any family members at all.
Right.
It's going to be more like you going
Hmm.
into your bedroom and looking at yourself in the mirror and being like, who am I? It's going to be more that energy.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, that was some big energy that I had then because it really upended. I mean, I had a lot of questions. I had a lot of stuff to
Yeah.
untangle because it was exactly who I defined myself as.
Yep.
Not just me, but my
Yep.
family, like you said, my
Yep.
friends, my beliefs. I had to figure out what it all meant, and that was pretty big. So if this is around myself, then this is going to be some big realizations
That was great
about
warm
myself
up
and who I
energy.
am. And
That was warm up.
wow, okay.
But I honestly, I
All
love
right.
the Pluto Sun transits because we genuinely, at that point, it can be a struggle to get there. Transforming is never like, oh, it's just so easy. There's always some work with transforming,
Right,
but at the same
right,
time, there is something
right,
so incredible for each of us about realizing that we are way more and way more powerful than we thought we were.
hmm,
And that is the Pluto Sun transit,
right,
is
right,
realizing that
right.
we are more than we could have imagined. So it's such a beautiful transit, but it is powerful. There is a lot of energy behind it, as there always is with
Right,
transformation. Okay,
right, right, right.
I
Okay.
want to call out that Mars, we can see Mars right now is up here in Cancer in the sort of upper right hand part of the chart.
Mhm,
Um, Mars is going to retrograde really
mhm,
soon. Mars is already in its retrograde, what's called shadow, the degrees that it's going to be retrograding through. Um,
uh-huh.
and so basically, Mars is going to go a little bit into Leo, and then it's going to come back through Cancer before it goes forward again. And this is going over your Saturn and your Moon. So um, there, and again, this is your eighth house of kind of the deeper, darker stuff. And so there likely is going to be, there are maybe some things you haven't fully dealt with. They've sort of been on the back burner, like from a priority list. You're like, okay, I can take care of these things. These other ones are towards the bottom. There's going to be a lot more
Hmm.
energy towards pulling that stuff up
Hmm.
from the bottom and working on it and getting it done.
Oh, okay. Okay. So like older type stuff that now is it stuff that I didn't know I stuck at the bottom of the list or as it comes up am I like, oh, right, I
This will be
need
stuff
to
you put at the bottom of the
kind of
list.
revisit that.
Yeah, there's no new surprising
Okay.
energy
Okay.
here. This is
Mm,
going to be more like um, some
okay.
things you put at the bottom of the list, and you're like, yeah, energetically, I can't deal with that now. I'll deal with that another time. And it didn't feel important, which is why you put it at the list.
Hmm.
But some things will come up where now you're like, oh, it
Right.
is
Okay.
important now. Now is the time to kind of work through it and move through it.
Okay.
So the nice thing about Mars transits is they get stuff
Okay.
moving. If anything is feeling stuck in a rut or like, oh, that's been at the
Right.
bottom of
Right.
my to-do list for like a decade, Mars will get things moving. Um, but with Mars retrogrades,
Okay.
and this is true for all of you people, because Mars is retrograding for all of us.
Mhm.
Mars retrogrades take a long time because
Right.
Mars's speed is quite close to the Earth's speed. Don't worry too much about the physics unless you care, but that's
Mhm.
true. So they take about 6 months.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
when like Mars always wants to push forward and always wants to do things, Mars hates going retrograde.
Mhm.
Mars thinks there's one direction and it's
Mhm.
forward. And so when Mars retrogrades
Okay.
for all of us, it's like we start to feel that, like, oh, come on, why can't this get done? Why are all these obstacles standing in my way? I just want to make forward
Okay.
progress. And typically, obstacles will kind of bubble up
Right.
where, oftentimes things that are outside of our
Mhm.
control and we just have to wait. And so there really
Mhm.
is, like, at the same time that there's so much energy there to move things forward, we do have to sort of um, work around our own frustration that things aren't moving faster. And Ben, sadly, we cannot
Okay.
refuse to accept Mars going retrograde. This is one I can't give you. If I could do this, I would have completely skipped the Mars retrograde in Gemini last time because that one was a rough one for me. So if I could make us
Yeah.
accept um, just Mars does not go retrograde, I would do it. But just keeping that in mind that you will be working on
Right.
some of those items from the bottom of your to-do list. Now will feel like the time to do it. They'll feel important to do. But at the same time, there will be some things kind of standing in your way where it's just like, oh, why does this have to take so long? Why does this have to feel so difficult? Why can't this feel easier? Um, but the nice thing is at the end of that 6 month
I
Mars
I kind of
retrograde,
feel
then you'll
that.
feel things really start to move. Sorry, go ahead.
Good, good. Because honestly, oh no, I was gonna say I feel that right now with frustration around the channel. I'm like, I gotta get to 500. I
Ooh,
gotta get to
yeah.
500, and I'm like, one at a time, one at a
Yes.
time, and I get so frustrated. And this is where Plant is really amazing about it. She's like, Christy, now you've only been around since May, and I'm like, I know, but I should be there by now. So this is a lot of what I deal with because like this is it is frustrating
Mm,
to me because it's like, okay, here, let's
yeah.
go. It's kind of like, the like learning how to drive a stick.
Yes.
It's like you kind of get it, and then you kill the car, and then you got to start over, and then you get it, and then you kill the car, and then
So
you go there, and then
true.
you get to a stoplight on a hill, and anybody who's driven a clutch knows you're just like, oh god, no, 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 I'm gonna roll backwards, I might hit the car, so okay,
I so
okay,
appreciate that you
that makes
used the
sense. That
manual
makes sense.
car analogy. I love that. I I've got a manual car. I love manual cars. I know they're kind of out of fashion, but I love them anyway.
Oh, there's so much. You feel so cool. There's something about going fast and like shifting gears. You're just like,
It's
that's
true.
me.
I can't argue. It's true.
I'm awesome.
Um, Also, yeah, and Plant, thank you for
Right.
posting those dates. Just FYI though, Mars has already entered its shadow, the degrees that it's going to retrograde back through. So Mars will not officially turn retrograde until Christmas Eve, but it will, like, it's already right now treading the ground. It's going to retrograde back and retread. And then once it does turn direct again, it has to go back over all of that ground for a third time. So the actual retrograde period is exactly what Plant posted, but we've got a couple months before it and a couple months after it of the shadow period. So this is going to be something we all work through together.
Right.
Um, One other thing that's super,
Right. Hey, at least we're not going through it
it's
alone.
true. One other thing, so we had a total solar eclipse in Libra last week. And
Mhm.
Christy, that happened exactly on your
Mhm.
Pluto. It happened at 10 degrees of Libra
Ooh.
with your Pluto at 11 degrees of Libra. So, we talked about how Pluto is going to be kind of moving into your third house and is going to be transforming a lot about the way you view yourself. It's basically like you have Pluto
Mhm.
moving towards your sun, and you have the sun that moved on top of
Mhm.
your Pluto and had a big eclipse. So it's sort of like, again, when we see something
Oh,
once, maybe when we see it twice, probably when we see it three times, definitely. So um, the sun, your
right.
identity, and Pluto's transformation are going to be really good friends here for the next
Mhm.
while. Um, eclipses always
Okay.
they bring endings and beginnings. When eclipses happen physically, we can't
Mhm.
see, like this was a solar eclipse, so we can't see the sun. Probably nobody here saw
Right.
it. It was only visible down by
Right.
Antarctica, and so us in the U.S. We're not able to physically see it. But if you were down in the South Pacific around Antarctica, you literally would have seen the ring of fire
Mhm.
for the solar eclipse. And those
Right.
those
Right. Right.
eclipses, they obscure light. And so our normal senses, like our normal
Mm.
eyes, we look around in the daytime and there's sunlight and we can see everything. Yay!
Mhm.
When there's an eclipse,
Right.
it's
Right.
it's
Right. Right.
obscuring the physical light of the sun, and we have to start using our inner eyes
Mhm.
rather than relying on the outer eyes and the
Mm.
outer sight. So typically, when people have big eclipses on top of points in their birth chart, um, it's a time when it's super important
Mhm.
to, instead of just like, well, this is the logical thing to do, this is what I see, this is what things look like, look inward. Because there are
Mhm.
probably things that your physical eyes are not seeing that you need your intuition to really tap
Mhm.
into. And so, again, as you're sort of entering this era of Pluto
Okay.
in Aquarius, moving towards your sun, as you had this big eclipse, solar eclipse on top of
Mhm.
Pluto, this really is a time. This is sort of kicking
Mhm.
off that transformation, where it's almost like you've
Okay.
closed your outer eyelids with the eclipse, not handling the
Mhm.
physical light
Mhm.
anymore, and you're tapping into that third eye
Mhm.
chakra, and you're like, what am I feeling here? Let me feel my way through this, coming from like my intuition, my insight.
Mm. So then this could be why things are affecting me in bigger ways where like before maybe I would have been like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, yeah, we can
Mm,
do, and I'm finding that I'm like, no, this is this.
you just cut out for a second.
If I
Oh, I think
I'm
you're back.
sorry, am
You're
I
back.
am I back?
You're back. Yes, you are back.
So so that so could it be like, because I know that I have been like, things that wouldn't normally bother me have really been bothering me, and it's like, no, that's not right. That's It's this. It is this. This is what I stand for. This is what it is. This is what I
Mhm.
chose. It is kind of what that is, because that's that, and it's becoming more. My intuition is so when I feel that, I might not necessarily explain it the right way, but it's like, no, this doesn't feel like the path I need to be on.
Yes.
And so if I'm on the wrong path, I'm kind of fighting myself with it, maybe not really knowing how to explain. Okay, that explains a lot of things, because there have been a few things that has come up for me that it's like, no, it's this, period.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like,
And this is
damn, I'm
you
not
starting to
normally like this.
discover, like, what yeah, but this is you starting to really take a
Okay.
stand for things that are important to you. Maybe society says, "Oh, it's not that important. Brush it off, let it go." But it might be
Mm-hmm.
something that is very important to you, and you get to own
Right.
that. And you don't have to
Right.
follow everybody else who says, "No, that shouldn't be that big a deal. Why is that bothering you so much?" And
Right.
really allowing yourself to
Right.
sit with those things, and again, dive into those Plutonian depths of, why does this bother me? Is this triggering a wound I had in the past that is waiting to be healed? And just understand, like, rather than brushing it off and like, why am I feeling this way? I don't usually feel this way. Like, taking the time to really
Uh huh.
understand where that energy is coming from, and allow that understanding to then help you transform and view yourself in a different way.
That
Um,
makes a lot of sense.
and, the other thing, and I know we're at pretty much 2 hours. Again, people, you can basically talk about this forever. And we are talking about birth chart and transits today. Like there are hundreds of techniques besides transits. So, I just want to impress on everyone the enormity of this cosmic system. People are kind of like, oh, there's a sun sign, I'm a Leo sun. And that's what a lot of us do when we get started. But this
Right,
is
right,
this
right,
is a lot more than like a Sunday paper 2 sentence horoscope. And I'm not even saying that those are not bad, but this is just so
right,
big
right,
of a system. But the last thing I want to call
right.
out is another technique, which I don't bring up for everyone's reading, but I'm bringing up here because it's important for you. Is there is
Okay,
a technique called perfection years, where each
okay,
year a different house gets emphasis. For you,
okay.
this year, from your last birthday in February until your next birthday in February, you are in a
Mhm.
first house perfection year, which means the first house is going to be really strongly
Mhm.
activated and be a really strong focus. And the
Okay.
first house is you. More than any other house in
Mhm.
the chart, our first house always represents us, that rising sign, that point rising in over the eastern sky at the moment we were born. So again,
Right.
Christy, it's like every indication I'm seeing, we've got Pluto moving into Aquarius towards your sun, self, identity.
Mhm.
We've got the total solar
Mhm.
eclipse from last week hitting directly on your Pluto, self, sense of identity. And what is the perfection year for you? It's your first house, self identity.
Identity.
So it's just like
Okay.
the whole chart is just sort of screaming like this is a time for you to really learn more about yourself, get to know yourself better,
Right.
realize how much more you are than you thought possible. And this Neptune
Right.
on your ascendant, it is going to help you do that, Christy, because again, you've got that big
Right.
picture. You can dream a lot. Some people can't. You can dream a lot. So
Uh-huh.
dream big over this time.
Okay.
Carefully work and identify any self limiting beliefs where you're like, oh, I'm not that type of person. I'm not good at that. Again, maybe you are.
Mhm.
Maybe this next best
Right.
version of Christy is good at those things. So this
Right.
is absolutely a
Right.
time,
Right.
again, try not to hold too tightly to your beliefs about yourself because all of that right now is just like setting up for change, like a set of dominoes.
Okay. I love it. All my beliefs are changing.
Well,
I
and I'm
like it.
sure it won't be
I
every
like it.
single belief. And sometimes too,
Right.
some of these big things like Pluto transiting the sun, it can scare people because they're like, no, I like myself the way I am. Oftentimes, Pluto
Right.
transits, they don't have to be a transformation from something to something. The butterfly still has the essence of the caterpillar. It didn't
Right. Right.
it didn't
Right.
become like those molecules, that energy didn't vaporize.
Mhm.
It's like
Right.
oftentimes it's additive, where it's taking things about yourself and expanding upon them and adding another layer. It doesn't mean you will be a
Mhm.
completely different person. It means that you will learn more and your sense of yourself will
Right.
expand. And that might mean that if there are areas of your sense of self that have been self limiting in some way or have been someone else's story rather than what you really are, it's time for those to fall away.
It's interesting you bring this up because there has lately, I have really not been feeling heard lately. It's
Yeah.
something I've really been struggling with. And so I've been
Mm,
very angry because it goes back to this trauma that I had from my ex of not being heard, and that's just icky nastiness. And so with this, it's all coming back up, and I couldn't figure out like why, because I had thought I've been through this. I've done this. Like I've done the work on this. I've
Mm,
talked about it. I've been, I've even said it on this channel before, like that old version of me um died, and did she die in vain,
yeah.
or like what, how can I change myself?
Mm,
And so I kind of feel myself, little bits and pieces of me are starting to re-emerge as like, no, you're not listening to me, you're not hearing me,
mm,
I'm not heard. And
yeah.
even Michael and I last, we were sitting outside talking, and I was just like, you can't be bitter, you can't, and it took everything
Mm,
I had. Like I just wanted to cry. And he's looking at me and he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I mean, I should be, but so
oh,
it's that kind of coming back up of, I'm not being heard. And um, so I think what I need to do is expand that and look
mm,
beyond that relationship with my ex, go back to my childhood. Where there was, there a time when I wasn't heard there? Was there a time in my
mm,
marriage where I didn't feel, friendships where I didn't feel heard? Like, how have I not felt heard? Because that is what's
yeah.
coming up. And I noticed for me, when I don't feel heard, I get very loud, and I get very angry, and I get very argumentative. And it's like, you're not listening to me. Well, nobody wants to listen to somebody who's yelling and acting a fool. I mean, come on. Like, that's not fun. Um, but I couldn't figure it out. Because
Mm,
I was just like, why this way? Why am I all of a sudden like acting like the Christie that I used to be a long time ago, who hasn't even been in
mm,
that experience? So there's got to be something more there that's coming up for me, that I'm needing to look at, like a deeper level of it, because I've already gone deep in healing it, but maybe this is more an inner child thing, or a childhood thing, or a thing with my children, or something along those lines of healing that part. Because I've also kind of like, I really haven't even talked to my family since we left to
mm,
go to North Dakota. And badly, I'm just like, you know
yeah.
what, none of that really felt right. Like it just didn't
Yeah.
feel right. And I just thought, and Michael's like, have you called your mom? No. But it's also the same reason why
Mm,
I don't get upset when my kids don't call me, because it's like, look, I have a tricky relationship with my mom, you have a tricky relationship with me. I get it. It's not a
mhm,
it's fine. Just let me know that you're alive and you're okay and we're all good. I don't need more than that.
right.
So I can see that it's a lot of stuff around children, and not just my children, but the bonus kids, my childhood. So I think I need to look at some inner child, like not
Mm,
being,
yeah.
really, really not being heard.
That
Wow.
feels so resonant, Christy, and, I'm also just kind of thinking about, all of this Pluto Sun stuff going on in your chart, and,
Mhm.
oftentimes when each of us, sort of, you mentioned sort of like an older version of yourself who is not here anymore. Sometimes we almost kill off a previous version of ourselves to sort of step into
Mhm.
this new person, which that can be
Yeah.
the most important thing to do at that time. But very likely, the part that we sort of have exiled has some good stuff
Mhm.
too. And when our
Mhm.
healing reaches a place where we have the emotional fortitude to kind of look back and say, okay, maybe I don't have to throw it all away and exile it all, but what parts of the old
Yeah.
Christie are things that are part of me that I do want to, carefully bring back and integrate.
Mm.
And that feels like,
Isn't this,
one more stage in healing.
and isn't it interesting that this month we're talking about shadow work and healing and the self and all of these things? Like, you guys, I don't do this on
Mm.
purpose. Like, I don't sit there and consciously go, oh, this ties together really well. It just sort of happens that way. But this
Again,
is,
you're in
this
the
is,
flow, you're moving with your astrology.
yeah, right, right. This is little, he,
Oh,
he keeps
Edgar,
moving and like,
oh, precious little guy.
he just is
Oh, he's so cute.
up. But he keeps laying like under my butt, and I'm afraid I'm gonna rock back and like, you sleep on the pillow. Sleep on the pillow. This
Oh.
has been amazing because I always learn so much from you when I get a chance to just listen to you talk about things because for me there's a lot of things that come up that I just don't understand, and it's like, what
Mm.
is this, why is it coming? And it never fails that whenever I get a chance to sit down and you're like, well, it's this, it makes a lot more sense and it gives me that sense of direction. And
Oh, I'm
Stasia and
so
I were
glad.
actually talking about this. Well, it's why I want to encourage all of you to, now, whether you do a birth chart reading with Karena or you whatever. Of course, I highly
Yep.
recommend doing a
There are
birth chart reading with
amazing,
Karena.
yes,
But
but there are other amazing astrologers
yeah,
out there. Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and it gives you the direction to go in, so you're not just, okay, Michael's home, the dogs are going to go bonkers here in a minute, but it gives you the direction to go, so you're not just like,
Yeah.
wait, what? Because sometimes it's like it's too much information, and so you have to kind of look at, how do I bring it down to me right now and what I need to focus on. And we had all of this big stuff, but now it's like, oh, okay, I need to focus on why I'm not feeling heard. What
Mm.
in my life is on that's causing me to not feel heard? And
Yeah.
that's really beautiful because when you have a direction to work in, you 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 get that understanding. You
Yeah.
can,
And one thing I'll say too, just doubling down on what you're saying, Christy, for me personally, I don't just read astrology charts, but it is an intimate part of my life that I use all the time. And one of the things that is
yes,
most helpful for me is seeing a time frame on things where it's like, oh, now is the
yes,
time for me
oh
to
yeah.
be doing this. I think sometimes all of us, we
Mhm.
feel like, oh, it's just going to be this way forever. And one thing that is beautiful is the planets keep moving, the energy keeps changing. So,
Right,
yeah, there's
right.
something, for me at least, there's something really comforting about knowing there are different times, there are different chapters. And okay, maybe this is a chapter
Yes,
where I'm going through some deep stuff, but there are other chapters where I won't be going through all the deep stuff.
right. Exactly, exactly. Well, you guys, Michael just walked in. The dogs are going nuts.
Yes. And
The
you all
cat's
have been
asleep behind
incredibly
my.
patient to stick around for a
Oh,
couple hours while we
this
scratch the surface of
I
your chart.
I could do this all day. This is so much
Me
fun. Karina, thank
too.
you so much.
Yes.
You guys, make sure to tune in tomorrow morning for the live tarot reading. And then on Wednesday, we're going to have Ben, and he is going to talk to us about body language and the Myers-Briggs personality stuff. We're going to be talking about me again. You guys are going to get to know me really intimately, but we're going to weave it all together. And you can take this, and then you can take what Ben said, you can weave it all together, and you can be like, oh, hey, that's who she is. So,
I love that so much.
bless your hearts, you guys. So, as always, Go conquer your world as only you can. We'll be here to help you light the way.